Fewer rights and fewer choices about how we live our lives. Freedom in America is shrinking. And according to one expert, the Constitution has effectively been terminated. The power of the federal government is way out of control. The FBI is spying on Americans. Dale Hurd brings us the details in this eye-opening report.
When the Iron Curtain fell in 1989, there was a wave of optimism and excitement that freedom had been unleashed, and there would be no going back to totalitarianism. But along the way, something went wrong. Global studies show that for most of the world, freedom has been in decline for many years. Add to that an economy consolidating under larger companies, with consumers seeing their purchasing choices restricted. Small business optimism is now at its lowest point in 10 years. Nearly 2 in 5 small businesses could not pay their rent in May. Consumers are having choices taken away from them, especially if the product they want runs on fossil fuel, mainly because of those in power supporting the belief in a man-made climate emergency. Energy analyst Dr. Marlo Lewis accuses Washington of trying to regulate the fossil fuel industry out of the economy.
This has put a big damper on capital investment in oil companies, natural gas companies. It's also made it very difficult for a coal company in particular, but even for a natural gas company, to get a substantial loan from the banks.
Driving energy costs up and the reliability of the nation's power grid down. Christian civil liberties attorney John Whitehead takes the radical view that the Constitution has been effectively terminated because so much of it is now regularly ignored. He says the many heavily armed government agencies and local police forces constitute a standing army on U.S. soil, ready to raid homes in violation of the Fourth Amendment, which protects our right to be secure in our persons and property.
The IRS has 4,500 guns, 5 million rounds of ammunition. The Veterans Administration has 11 million rounds of ammo. The Department of Health and Human Services, believe it or not, has 4 million rounds of ammo. The Social Security Administration has 800,000 rounds of ammo for their special agents and armors and guns.
Even NASA has a SWAT team. Since 1980, SWAT raids have risen from 3,000 a year to 80,000.
Why do our police have to have grenade launchers and MRAPs, which are tanks on tires, in communities of 5,000 people? The Fourth Amendment's dead.
And the First Amendment, which was intended to protect speech the majority doesn't like, no longer prevents people from being censored, canceled, deplatformed, or even debanked. A Penn State poll showed most Americans believe they've lost more personal freedoms in the past 10 years than they have gained, while another survey found that 1/3 of Americans think having a strong leader who doesn't have to bother with Congress or elections would be a good system of government. One of the forces behind the fall of the Iron Curtain and a leader of the Czech Velvet Revolution, Jaroslav Flieder, told us he never expected the free world to turn out like this, and said he's especially upset that many Americans seem okay with a loss of rights when it's used against their political enemies.
People whose rights are being, removed, they really do not perceive it that way. They sometimes actually think, almost see it like as a benefit, as a beneficial process, because sometimes these rights are taken from people they don't like and they applaud it. And in this situations like that, I always tell them, yeah, it might be actually pleasing now, just wait until you are the object of this process. When your rights are violated and when it's going to be done to you, you won't find it as much, fun as, you're finding it now.
Dale Hurd joins us now here in the studio. Dale, you presented it in your report. There was great optimism after the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed. And then within a generation, we've arrived at this point. How did that happen?
Yeah, I think it shows how wide the chasm is in our society between right and left. And people want to see constitutional violations used against their political opponents, which is a big mistake. But it also begins with the government. Our own government is trying to and sometimes using constitutional violations. But in terms of the public, it really isn't 50-50. I didn't stress this in my story, but it's primarily Democrats who believe in limits on speech, and they see the Constitution as an impediment to their remaking America in a more liberal image.
John Whitehead says, look, the Constitution's dead. You have all these federal agencies now that have either guns or riot gear and so forth. What do they say when they're asked about that? Why do they need it?
I don't think any of us have heard a good explanation. I mean, how many armed confrontations does Social Security have in a year with people? What I think is the deep state looks out on the country, they see all the armed citizens, and they're thinking, we need to somehow balance this. We need to protect government, and that's the only explanation I can come up with.
And the Czech velvet revolution there, what about the warning that they're giving? I mean, they know firsthand. They've gone through this. What about these warnings? How come we're not heeding these warnings? Does anybody really care? Are we listening?
Yeah, again, because I think the chasm is so wide. I mean, we're at some part of a pre-Civil War phase in this country. I don't know. Maybe we're very far from it, and when we're praying that the Lord will unify this country and bring us together. But the division is so wide. What we should be doing, right and left, is we should object when constitutional violations are used against our political opponents, because the Constitution was essentially created to protect the minority or views we don't like. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing these violations as a great hammer to beat down our political opponents. The left views the Constitution as what conservatives want to use to thwart them, and the left would like the Constitution rewritten or out of the way.
Okay, we're very polarized, so how do we come together?
Yeah, we need to pray.
Yeah. Well, Dale HURD, that's a good note to end on. Thank you, Dale. What an excellent report.
Thank you,
Keep up
Jerry.
the good work. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thanks for being with us.